Professor Stiglitz, welcome to CCTV News.
Nice to be here.
Well, you talk about the American dream has now become a myth. What exactly do you mean?
Well, the American dream was the idea that anybody could make it from the bottom to the top, middle to the top, that the system was fair, and that the life chances of somebody were just dependent on his own work. And the reality is the level of inequality in our society has been growing and growing and growing to the point where today the United States is the most unequal of any of the advanced industrial countries. One of the reasons I wrote my book, The Price of Inequality, is to alert Americans to the fact that things have changed, that this American dream is now a myth, and that we are paying a very high price for this inequality, that it is undermining not just our sense of value, self-identity of America as a fair society, but also undermining our economy, undermining our democracy, dividing our society.
And here in China, we see Mr. Xi Jinping, who is now being elected as the country's leader, also talk about China dream. What he said is the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. That seems to be his interpretation. But overall speaking, it seems that people have common dream, which is prosperity. What exactly do you think is wrong with our world these days that we have to talk about dreams in order to realize a short and possibly long-term goal?
In the beginning of China's transition, it was very easy. You were a very poor country, and you had hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in poverty, and there was a well-defined vision of where you wanted to go. You wanted to let them get out of poverty. You wanted to be a strong country. Well, you've now accomplished both of those goals. You still have lots of people in poverty, but 400 or 500 million people have been lifted out of poverty. By 2020, you will be the largest economy in the world. So you've succeeded in making China a strong economy. But now the question is, what about the living standards of the people? What is the vision for China? What is the dream for where it wants to go? And I think it's very clear. It should be a dream where living standards, not just GDP, but living standards, quality of life is going up. It should be a dream of opportunity, where no matter where the child is born, whether it's poor parents or rich parents in the city or the rural area, he has a chance to live up to his potential.
Professor Stiglitz, you said earlier that GDP is not the right measure to figure out the wealth of a country and the development stage of a country. Then what is the alternative?
Well, I chaired an international commission on the measurement of economic performance and social progress. And our conclusion was there was no single number that could summarize anything as complex as the economy. But you shouldn't focus on GDP or just GDP. There are other aspects, for instance, what's happening to the environment, what's happening to health, what's happening to the distribution of income, what's happening to wealth. You have to assess sustainability. And we discussed what we call a dashboard of measures. So in the case of China, for instance, GDP has been going up, but you all know about the problems of pollution, air and water pollution, food safety. You all know about the problems of inequality, with the disparities between the rich and the poor, the urban and the rural, getting larger rather than smaller. So I think here you have come to realize that while your GDP has been doing fantastically, some of these other aspects, which are very important in the quality of life, in the quality of growth, have not gotten the attention they deserve.
We are talking about problems existing in our economies these days, but people have been trying to figure out the remedies. One of those solutions, some argue, is quantitative easing, as you have seen in the United States, as you have also recently seen in Japan. But there are debates, certainly, about that, the pros and the cons. Your opinion?
I think it depends on the particular situation of the country. I've been critical of quantitative easing in the United States, partly because the major impact of quantitative easing has been felt outside the United States. The hope was that the provision of additional liquidity would lead to more investment in the United States, an expansion in the United States. The problem is that the credit channel is clogged. It's not working. And so rather than the liquidity going into the United States, some of it is, but much of it is going everywhere else in the world. The lower interest rates have encouraged money to move outside the United States, lowers the exchange rate, and, as you say, has the effect of a competitive devaluation. But it's worse than that, because not only does the value of the dollar go down, it presents a real problem for many countries that face an onslaught of capital coming into their countries, and, not surprisingly, an appreciation of their currencies. In the case of Japan, the problem is more complicated, because while Japan's economy has not grown very strongly for the last 20 years, the QE2 in the United States has led to their exchange rate going way up. And that's been hurting their economy. One of the countries that has not responded but has faced a serious problem is Japan. And so Japan quite naturally says, we have to have a strategy that will promote our economic growth that's been low for 20 years. We have to have a strategy that stimulates demand. We have to respond to what the United States is doing.
Do you expect there is going to be any potential of a currency war, as some have been talking about so much recently?
Well, that was a term that I think Brazil brought to the table, and I think that's maybe too strong of a term. What is true, absolutely, is that when large countries like the United States engage in monetary policy, particularly strong monetary policies of attempting to lower the long-term interest rates, quantitative easing, it has externalities. It has effects on others. And they should be mindful of those other effects. And they should be mindful that others will respond. And one of the responses to QE2 has been many countries have put up capital controls. The IMF now has supported the selective use of capital controls, and much of that is a response to, a consequence of the U.S. quantitative easing. So in some sense, in terms of the U.S. long-term goal of opening up capital markets, it had just the opposite effect.
Thank you so much, Professor, for being with us. Thank you so much.